Hello, everybody. Rick Manning here, President Americans for Limited Government. Donald Trump last week laid out some really strong legal reasons why the special counsel who's attempting to go after Donald Trump, Trump Derangement Syndrome, on the classified documents issue, why he's absolutely 100% legally wrong. And I just wanted to share that with you because it's very succinct and it makes the case pretty well. And then we'll talk a little bit about the power of the Article 2 powers in the Constitution and how that relates after this clip. Because liberty matters, because people's due process right matters. I don't care if
Hey, Rick, we need to reshare audio on that. We're not getting audio.
Wow. The penalty is death. Folks, these people have gone nuts. And I have to apologize. I've got some skin cancer treatment going on, but I can't let this go. I mean, the fact of the matter is the U.S. Constitution, Article 2, all powers that the FBI has, all powers that the Department of Justice have, all flow through the presidency, all flow through the Oval Office, the elected president of the United States. It doesn't flow through some magical power that the Department of Justice has to determine who is able to do what and who isn't able to do what, determine what documents should be classified, what documents shouldn't be classified. The Department of Justice has that power as part of the executive branch. And they can't overcome the fact that the President of the United States, duly elected President of the United States, that would be Joe Biden today, the elected President of the United States has an absolute right to override any decision they make. That's been true for as long as I can remember. Ronald Reagan at Reykjavik was told by his national security advisors, we don't want to tell Gorbachev about strategic defense initiative. And Reagan did. And the press went wild. He violated national security, blah, blah, blah. The truth was, no charges were filed because Ronald Reagan had an absolute right to share whatever he wanted with Gorbachev. Nothing is classified to the President of the United States. The President of the United States determines what's classified and what's not, and what's in the public interest and what's not in the public interest, not the FBI. And particularly in a circumstance where the Department of Justice itself is the subject of the actual cover-ups that many of these documents exposed, that had a natural inclination, a natural desire to stop the distribution of these documents. So yeah, it's a guess what? Donald Trump is 100% right. And if they pursue these charges, if the special counsel pursues these charges, I hope and pray that he takes it directly to the Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court has to knock this down and say, by saying Article 2 of the Constitution is inviolable. If you want to change the law, the Constitution, either write a new one or amend this one. But you don't get to change the fact that the administrative state does not operate separate from the President of the United States. And that's just, it's so fundamental. It just drives me nuts. And with that, I'm just going to let you ponder that. We're going to move on to the riots, and what happened in the Tennessee State House, a reminder of what happened in the Wisconsin State House in 2011. And I'll tell you a little bit about what NRA, when I was the NRA lobbyist in New Jersey, what we did the State House in, I think it was 91, but it's maybe it's 1990. Long time ago. My face didn't look like this then, but it was but all applicable to what's going on in the States. So with that, we're going to go to a little quick break. Because liberty matters, because people's due process right matters. I don't care if they're from the left or the right. The bottom line is the reports of treatment that are coming out of that jail are reprehensible. They are not American.
These scientists may be complicit in one of the greatest crimes against humanity.
But I think it raises a lot of questions about whether the money is going to be funneled ultimately into the Chinese Communist Party and the Chinese military.
You got to pick a side. And General Milley picked one. And it wasn't the red, white, and blue. Yeah, it's I appreciate you guys paying attention. Yeah, so here you go. You have the Tennessee, some footage of people being arrested inside the State House, something big contrast to having the Capitol Police escorting around Jacob Chansley. But we see the people causing trouble and inside the State House and blocking the State House. Now we're going to go and we're going to take a look at, if I can get off of this thing. We're going to take a look at the what happened in Wisconsin. Yeah. So let's look at Wisconsin here. This is this was in 2011, but I think it's important to see it. This is the Wisconsin State Legislature. Public employee unions protesting. Taking over the state capitol. The state capitol was not able to operate for a day or two as a result of this takeover. So that gives you just a little taste. It's the fact is that we saw in the Tennessee situation, we saw AOC, who was so traumatized by actual people being inside the U.S. Capitol, sitting there and being outraged that legislators who led people onto the Capitol floor, who were chanting in both, one who was chanting in a bullhorn in the face of other members of the House with all these protesters inside, all demanding that the people of Tennessee have their gun rights taken away. And it's and so we had so AOC was outraged that and said, the Republican fascists are at work because AOC wanted the state house to be taken over. That was a righteous cause. And just understand, this is the same AOC who spent time complaining and claiming falsely that she had to hide under her desk when that was completely and totally false. So understand, we sit there and say, well, wait a second, they did this and they did that. There is no sense of equity in what's happening here. Nancy Pelosi called the Wisconsin protest virtuous, encouraged people to do that. We saw a similar protest in Indiana when right to work laws were being passed in Indiana. So what we see is if you have a cause that is supported by the left, and a Republican legislature seeks to amend the law to make it so it's more equitable, then this is something that causes, you need to have massive civil disobedience. You have to have floors of the state house taken over. The Republican legislators who deign to actually stand up for law changes that help their economy, that help their states, those state legislators are vilified and are threatened on the House or Senate floor, depending on where it is. So this is this wasn't any group. This wasn't like unnamed people. This was the SEIU on the floor. Okay. In fact, they quote an SEIU organizer who is quoted from the Wisconsin State House Capitol building, from inside the occupied Capitol building. This is from peoplesworld.org, which is obviously far left. And so this was an organized attempt to take over a state legislature and stop the business of the state legislature. Sound familiar? These people nobody was escorting these people around. These people had taken it over and refused to leave, blocking the business of the state house for days. Similarly, in Tennessee, the objective was to intimidate and try to take over the state house. And they did end up stopping the state house from doing its business for quite a while. So now I'm going to if you'll indulge me for a second. In 1990, when I was a state lobbyist, New Jersey for the National Rifle Association, we had a problem. The governor, with a majority Democrats in the House and the Assembly and majority Democrats in the Senate, Democrat Governor Jim Florio was pushing a bill which would ban not only the sale, but also the possession of semi-automatic firearms. And we were pushing back against that. We had 7 Democrat Assembly people who had pledged to us before the election that they would not support this bill. And what we knew was happening was in the caucus room, the Assembly leadership Democrat caucus room, we knew that these guys were getting beaten up by their colleagues and by the governor's office to get them to agree to vote for this legislation to ban guns, and really egregious legislation. And we had about 1,200 people on the State House grounds at that point. And so we went inside, and nobody's tried to stop us. It was open, anybody could go inside. So we went inside and we basically filled up the hallways in the State House, and we sang patriotic songs, and we chanted for the individual Democrat House members, urging them to hold firm, and made our voices heard. The state police came to me and said the Speaker of the Assembly, a guy named Joe Doria, needs to be able to get from where he was to his office, which was through the crowd. And he asked me to stand on a chair. I stood on a chair, and I just said, I got everybody's attention. I said, make a path for Speaker Doria. And Speaker Doria walked through, took no abuse. Nobody talked to him. He walked through this through this group, a fully packed State House. He walked through in total peace and got to his destination. And that was, and so having, taking it to the directly to the legislature is, I don't really see a lot wrong with that. You're not allowed to obstruct their proceedings. You're not allowed to go on the assembly floor and say, no, you can't do this. That's not what you're allowed to do, but you're certainly allowed to have an impact. And, the truth of the matter is every one of those Democrats collapsed, and we lost the vote 43-37 in the assembly. I guess we lost 44-36, I'm sorry. In the assembly, we lost in the Senate 23-17, all party line vote. Actually, we lost in the Senate. I think 23-17. We got two Democrats to vote with us in the Senate. We lost one Republican, and Bill Gormley from Atlantic City. But when that set the stage for a big fight over the next year to try to trim it back and create some capacity to slow down the onslaught, it caused a major fight for the next year. And we'd have thousands of people at the Capitol saying, basically fighting for constitutional rights. But what they didn't do is they didn't break anything down. In fact, the main rally we had, one of the big rallies, tulips were coming up in the State House grounds. And we had a rally that was between the tulips and then out into the street. About 10,000, I guess 8 to 10,000 people were there. And when we got done, there wasn't a single tulip bulb broken, because we knew that anything that happened, if there was a single piece of trash left on the ground, the headline would have been NRA trashes state capitol. And we couldn't have that. There's a way to do this. There's a way not to do it. These people are doing it the wrong way. And the fact of the matter is they should be held accountable. Those legislators from Tennessee should have been thrown out of the legislature. And the fact that their local governments are replacing them back in there shows you how corrupt and what and kind of misunderstanding the role that their legislator is supposed to play. By the way, one of those legislators was found to have been assaulting people on the streets in 2020 in a political protest, actually assaulting drivers and other people in the street. And now he's a state legislator who got thrown out and now is back in. So political violence is not new to him, and it's a big and so it's a problem. And I just wanted to make that share that with you. I'm going to switch over to a third subject here, which I hope and it's Alvin Bragg, because there's a lot of stuff happening with Alvin Bragg, and I want to just share with you a couple of things that have happened. First of all, as you know, undoubtedly know, Alvin Bragg is trying to stop Jim Jordan from by suing the House Judiciary Committee and saying, no, you can't investigate our investigation. It's impeding a state and local investigation, and the House Judiciary Committee can't do it. He had asked the judge say to accept his argument and put a temporary restraining order on any House Judiciary Committee activities. A federal judge said no. We're not going to do that, and set up a hearing for next week to try to determine. One of the reasons that Jim Jordan is looking at the Bragg investigation is because what happened. Here's the Bragg sues Jim Jordan House GOP for brazen unconstitutional attack. But one of the reasons why there's the court rejecting. Now I'm getting the one I want. This guy right here, this guy who I've got my little arrow going over right there. He's the guy who Jim Jordan wants to talk to first. Why? Because he was at the Biden Department of Justice and got hired out of the Biden Department of Justice by Bragg specifically to do this prosecution. Now he claims he's going to do all high-profile white crime prosecutions. Fact of the matter is, he's straight out of the Biden GOJ, and it's rumored that there are many other prosecutors on the Bragg team that are straight out of the Biden DOJ. Now, we know about him, Michael Colangelo, and we know his history, and that he was the acting head of Civil Rights Division at DOJ before and became the number 2 in the Civil Rights Division at DOJ when the appointee got confirmed. But so we have a direct link between the Biden DOJ and the prosecution of Donald Trump. The prosecution of Joe Biden's likely opponent in 2024. And when there's a direct link, the House has an absolute responsibility to say, wait a second, what's going on here? What's the Biden DOJ up to? And that's exactly what they're doing. What's more, the Manhattan District Attorney receives a lot of money from the Department of Justice from U.S. taxpayer dollars. And the House Judiciary Committee has an absolute right to have oversight over how that money is being spent. And they have a responsibility to oversee how that money is being spent. And so these are the 2 reasons Jordan's being able to do this, Chairman Jordan. And he's doing a good job to try to go after this. But understand, we have a prosecutor in Alvin Bragg who doesn't care about violent crime. He lets violent criminals off the street all the time. His job that the Soros funders have given him is to prosecute Donald Trump. And he's now brought in a DOJ, U.S. Department of Justice and former employee, high-ranking official, to do that job. And Jim Jordan has an absolute, and the House Judiciary Committee has an absolute legal interest in this. And what will be interesting is if Colangelo says, I won't appear, he's been subpoenaed. He says he won't appear, then you know what? Steve Bannon said he wasn't going to appear until it was determined that he was legally allowed to do so. The courts determined he was legally compelled to do so, legally because of presidential executive privilege. And then he said, okay, well, I'll appear. The Democrats in the House J6 committee didn't care about Bannon's reason for not appearing and his willingness to appear. When he missed the subpoena date, they went and prosecuted him. The U.S. Attorney's Office prosecuted Steve Bannon, and no excuses. There was no, oh, well, you're going to come talk to us, great. No, none of that. They didn't allow him to make a defense. In the U.S. Attorney's Office went after him, didn't allow him to make a defense, and effectively said, okay, well, you didn't show up, so so we're going to hold you in contempt of Congress, and you violate subpoenas, so we're going to put you in jail. That's what happened with Steve Bannon. And if Mr. Colangelo chooses not to show up the House Judiciary Committee and misses his subpoena date, Jim Jordan and Kevin McCarthy have every right to expect the U.S. Attorney's Office to take this violation of the subpoena every bit as seriously as they took the violation of the subpoena by Steve Bannon, and to hold him to the same account and to prosecute him the exact same way. That is called equal justice under the law. I don't like the garbage that's being done, but that will be an interesting test of whether or not the U.S. Attorney's Office is willing to do that, which we know they won't, and whether or not the House Republicans will then say, well, we're not funding your office. We're cutting your funds. We're making it so you can't prosecute any white-collar criminals. Okay, there's a lot of things that they can do in terms of funding of the U.S. Attorney's Office in D.C. if they refuse to actually enforce the law. So, folks, stay tuned. This is going to get interesting. Lots going on. Sorry for my chemically burned face, but should be better. I'm doing fine. I've got some calls over the last couple of days asking me if I was okay because you hadn't seen me on here for a while. And the reason you haven't seen me is because I don't think anybody wants to see me right now. With that, we will check in tomorrow, and thank you very much for all you do. Bye-bye.